There is a chapter of Space Marines who no longer feel pain, spreading pox and disease. There are those who are forced to bear this burden chained with broken pride, and there are those who embrace this gift as their own. But today we are making a diorama about our brother Cloticus, our lovely little space wizard. Now Cloticus is from a limited release of the Space Marine Heroes set. It took me a while to find, but I finally managed to hunt him down. With Cloticus now built, let's get painting. For this we are going to be dry brushing English uniform from Vallejo all over the black base coat by getting our pure paint onto a makeup brush and getting rid of most of it by wiping it on a piece of tissue or the top of my wet palette. Now we don't want the whole model to be covered in paint at this point, we want some nice texture and gradients from the black to the nice mustardy colour. Now for the second paint we are using Desert Yellow because this is the only midtone I have, but for this we are wiping off even more paint and being even more focused on where we are dry brushing, aiming for the middle of the armour pieces instead of trying to get deep in there. And for the final highlight I used Ogryn Camo, dry brushing just the edges of this model at this point and some of the flat panels like his chest and knee. And he already looks great. And while I think of what colours to paint him in next, let's get to the diorama. The two things we're going to need are some corkboard and a base of a Space Marine Dreadnought. Using some hot glue, I started building up the diorama by tearing off small chunks of corkboard and making a little mound for our Dreadnought friend to have a little lie on later. I also used some foam to fill in more gaps and covered it in, of course, more cork. Now this base is looking like, well, a bunch of cork and foam. And while you wouldn't be wrong, we are going to tie in everything together by pouring a bunch of foam flocking and sand all over it. Now a lot of people ask me why I use foam flocking when I'm going to paint over it later, and the reason is texture. It adds this lovely nice looking grass texture over everything, and it allows me to control what colour the grass is. So to glue the sand and foam down, I poured some isopropyl alcohol all over the foam, which will remove any of the surface tension, allowing the white glue to seep into all of those nooks and crannies. Okay, let's get back to Cloticus, as we are going to paint all of his armour trim in decayed metal to add to his centuries-year-old armour. When it comes to painting all of his armour trim, it's really important to keep your hands as steady as you can, as it's going to be quite hard to repaint the dry brushed effect. If you have ever wondered how to steady your hands, make sure to keep your elbows grounded with either your wrists against the table or your hands held together, as this will create more points of contact, steadying your hands and hopefully creating fewer paint errors. So let's move on to all of the silver and iron parts of the model, predominantly the sword, the staff, the chains and the vent exhausts of the model. And once all that was done, I tried out a new paint I have called Black Lotus, which is similar to contrast paints but by Vallejo, and I painted it onto all of the cloth and leathery parts of the model. And I think it gave it quite a nice change of hue. I'll definitely be using this one in more models to come. So the last little touch of the armour is the light stippling of gold over all of the decayed metal, as this gives a really nice shine and an old metallic feel to the model, making this Plague Marine look centuries old. As we are going to be painting some brighter colours later on, I base coated all of these areas in grey and added white highlights on top so that the saturation of the paints will come through. Now for all of these worm-like creatures, I use voluptuous pink contrast paint, as it really gives that lovely horrific hue. And for the bones / roots, I'm not sure what they were, I mixed Zephyrum Shade with Known Oil 1:1 and painted it all over. After a quick wash of yellow rust from Dirty Down, I painted the Goblin Dude in some contrast flesh colours. and after painting some more tentacles, he is practically done. So with our Plague Marine finished, let's start painting our diorama. We are simply going to airbrush a lovely bright green contrast paint over our zenithal highlights. This will give us all of our shadows and highlights all in one colour. Then I sprayed some Imperial Fist yellow to give a nice spring vibe. Now let's get building the one and only Ballista's Dreadnought. The Dreadnoughts are a closed sarcophagus, allowing even the most broken Marine to carry on fighting for centuries after their defeat, some without ever seeing true sunlight again. And while this Dreadnought has fought valiantly for his little brothers, his rest has finally come. So when it came to destroying this Dreadnought, I wanted it to look like some humongous creature has ripped the front panels off for our boy Cloticus to work his blood magic. Now, the idea for this diorama actually came to me when I came up with a funny idea to create a Space Marine army, but the catch is every Marine, Dreadnought and vehicle has fallen in battle just like this. I think it would be pretty funny to turn up to a tournament and see the confusion on your opponent's face when he realizes not one of your Space Marines are alive. And you could even do this with loads of different factions, like this one's a Nurgle boy who's destroyed a Dreadnought. You could do a Tyranid force devouring the Space Marines. So after clipping out all of the armor, I placed some air drying clay inside, and once it was wet, I used one of my texture paste stirrers to add some hideous texture to the clay. And with the clay now dry, I got out my rotary tool and added some deep scratches onto his armor and general battle damage to the armor panels. So it's finally time to paint our last miniature of the day. So after a quick priming of black spray, I started to dry brush heavily a nice warmish grey all over the armor panels. This is for some texture, and I added a small dry brush of a light grey afterwards. And this all led us to airbrushing our Black Lotus all over this Dreadnought. Now you can do this by in fact using a normal brush, and I would probably recommend doing that. I think it would probably turn out better than the airbrush in this case. Why don't I? You live and learn. Then finally for the weapons, I airbrushed them in a nice white. So this has all led to us painting the metallics. For the most part, we are using the same paint as before for our brother Cloticus, so let's paint all the silver in black metal. For the accent colour, I chose a lovely nice bronze for all of the caps, bolts, and exhausts as it stands out from our relatively monochrome paint scheme. And at this moment I painted all of the little lenses red with a silver outlining and all the rocket pods a nice black. With the bulk of the Dreadnought now painted, let's get all that gooey stuff painted. For this I'm going to be using a matte red from AK Interactive and painting it all over the dried clay to give it a really nice horrible effect. Once dried, it was time to add some Wildwood contrast paint, pouring this all over the red and thinning it down with some water once it was on there. This makes it look nice, old and dank. And finally, to bring it all together, we are using blood for the blood gods and putting it everywhere for that nice delicious red shine. So after quickly painting the purity seals, it's time to reveal the secret to painting purity seals. And it's all down to the Micron pen. This pen is so small that you can literally write sentences on a purity seal. It's only unfortunate for me because my handwriting never progressed past learning how to write. Maybe I really should have become a doctor. And after that, I added some small black enamel washes over all of the metallics. Then all that's left to do at this point is paint this rock grey Add a wash of a dark grey on top, then dry brush the original grey all over it. I also wanted to add some more shadows over the diorama quickly, so I airbrushed some dark green towards the bottom. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to help me out, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, I've been Reese, and I'll catch you in the next episode. See ya!